If we get our hands on Rubicon's coral, we'll make a killing. Plenty for a merc with a fried brain like you to buy their life back. Enough chat, back to work. Scavenge the AC Rex ahead and find a valid mercenary license. We're illegals here. You'll need ID to operate.
Over the last 3 decades, there has been a number of titles that have brought the mech warrior genre into the spotlight of gaming. One such title spawned a series and went on to help make a push for more player customization in gaming overall. Which game are we talking about? Well, that would be none other than Armored Core, the first of many games in a long-running series developed and published by From Software in Japan, and starting since Armored Core 1, it would be exclusively released on the PlayStation platforms for multiple titles. So, Armored Core. It would go on to have worldwide success and failure, but it has to be stated it was the catalyst for games like SOCOM US Navy SEALs, Need for Speed, and Call of Duty to do loadouts before heading into missions with the way it pushed for more customization and even had the ability to paint logos into the game. Pretty cool tech for a game that came out in 1997, and was running on a console with limited memory, and a memory card that fit 8 megabytes worth of save data. That's the equivalent of maybe 2 4K screenshots nowadays. I remember first seeing Armored Core way back on the included PlayStation Underground demo disc, scrolling up to the video preview box and jumping into a blow everything up frenzy that was Armored Core 1.
The test is over. From this moment on, you are a Raven.
As we all know, FromSoft started to have a hard time modernizing the series during the PS3, Xbox 360 era, and because of this, the majority of the fan base started to not care anymore, and move on to other story-driven games that could both build a world and have impactful, high-octane gameplay that would drive the player further through arching narratives, which was something that most Armored Core games just barely dived into. With this, Hidetaka Miyazaki would push into a new genre of games, or rather create a new genre to make a universe that was familiar, yet all his own. Of course, what I'm alluding to is, Dark Souls. First though, I want to rewind just a bit to Demon Souls on the PS3. Miyazaki would go on to not only revolutionize the action game genre, but create something of a genre in itself, with gameplay pushing for more stamina and lock-on control in combat over just a typical hack and slash and combo-oriented combat. While the Souls genre grew in popularity, the Armored Core series took a back seat. For the better part of a decade, it seemed like Armored Core was being forgotten, but really, a mix of game engine enhancements and the fact that FromSoft was building the company and technology up, similar to how a Merc does contracts in Armored Core to build up an AC unit. See what I did there? So too was Miyazaki building up FromSoftware's development teams and setting the stage for what would be the grand return of Armored Core.
You again. You know, I'm not exactly craving company here.
Hounds now entering combat zone. Initiating phase 2.
So what happened to 617 and the others? Fill me in, Admiral Walter. Well, at least you're helping me clear my inventory.
Vital signs lost. Recalculating approach vector.
This one is functional, but don't expect much more.
I'm not here to talk. Wake it up. Signal lost. Updating target parameters. Phase 3, pattern E. Six 1-7 down. Reporting to Handler Walter. Mission complete.
621. I'll give you a reason to exist. Let's get to work.
One question that came very quickly from those that never played or never even heard of Armored Core before was, What is Armored Core? And is it like Dark Souls? The difference between Armored Core and Souls-likes, which a quick reminder, FromSoft basically started both game types, and now most dev studios have either adopted or have played around with the formulas of each. But the difference between both of them is the approach to gameplay. Armored Core is more like building a car for a racing game, or putting together a gun setup to fit the combat situation in FPS, while also forming it to your own combat style. The Souls-style gameplay is about increasing stats, but also learning the movesets of the enemies and bosses. In the process of learning, you have to inherently master your own skill of patience and persistence, while figuring out the puzzle of what pieces of your loadout is actually benefiting your playstyle, and which ones are creating a hole in your overall plan of attack. Anger and frustration come from this learning curve, but in the end, when you learn, grow, and succeed, you'll ultimately come out on the other end with sharper skills that you can use to beat other Souls-like games, or even intertwine the patience and precision to jump into, say, a 2D style fighting game like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. Armored Core 6 has sold nearly 3 million copies and is the best-selling Armored Core in the series as of the recording of this video. Impressive when you think there's been releases on 11 different platforms and the series has been around for almost 3 decades. So why is AC6 the most successful of them all? Well, there's a few reasons for this success, with the first main reason being at this point, FromSoft has made themselves a household name when it comes to gaming using the Soulsborne genre to not only challenge gamers, but also create a viral showcase of players taking down hard-to-beat boss fights, and with that comes bragging rights, but more importantly, the feeling of accomplishment when you beat the boss fights. There's no co-op mode in Armored Core 6, so that introduces a learning curve, the same type of learning curve that you have in Dark Souls and Bloodborne when you play them solo. It makes the main boss fights in the story feel that much more epic and dramatic instead of it just being another contract that lasts 30 seconds to 5 minutes to blow a few things up, get paid, and go back to a menu. Let's take the first boss fight in AC6 for example, Balteus. It changed the formula while holding on to the core aspects of the Armored Core experience. On first playthrough, when you don't have the best of setups or knowledge of the game mechanics and are still figuring out what works the best with your own personal combat style and the timing of it all, the boss fight will feel almost impossible and have even made some people rage quit and uninstall the game. This gives Armored Core that extra Souls-like feeling that's put FromSoft on the map now. The challenge and overcoming it is what players crave the most, even if they don't realize it and criticize the difficulty. AC6 takes the world building and storytelling aspects of what made games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Demon Souls so special and brings it all together in an explosion-filled around and find out experience. While Armored Core 4 had decent gameplay, it lacked characters and world building. Armored Core 5 had very arcade-like gameplay, which felt more like, power armor and less like a giant mech, but started to introduce characters and a somewhat overarching storyline. Now Armored Core 6 learned from the prior 10 years of Soulsborne world building and character development to finally bring together a solid package that has a bit of everything. Even though the AC units still look and feel like toys, they bring a solid punch to an all-round tough challenge, that being the main boss fights.
I weep too. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Let's try. My friend, this is a gift. Thank you.
Enemy.
All or nothing.
Target's coral shield has been wiped out.
On you now, buddy.
I've identified the target. That's the mercenary who took your name. Let's see how far they can fly. On borrowed wings. The will to choose what one fights for.
Just focus on the fight, 621.
Yes, Raven, I feel it too. This mercenary has potential.
The will to choose.
AP at 50%. Light hand ammunition at 30%. Light shoulder ammunition at 50%. AP at 30%.
Raven, we can still... All right. We'll watch this one. See where they go on a Raven's wings.
We're close to Rubicon. Wake the dog up.
Handler Walter verified. Activating cerebral coral control device. Augmented human C4621 has awakened.
Time to get to work, 621.
Armored Core 6 tells a story set 100 years in the future after AC-5 and sets up a reboot timeline altogether. We hear of augmented human C4621, a Armored Core pilot brought back from the dead sometime after being destroyed along with their unit trying to possibly take out a massive machine. 621 is augmented to have all skill and senses but no emotions, seemingly the perfect weapon. Under the broker handler Walter, 621 is brought in as an independent merc, and from there we have our jump-in point on the story. First things first, we need a call sign, which 621 finds from an AC wreckage. The call sign being Raven, which for longtime fans of Armored Core, you recognize Raven as being the player's call sign since the very first Armored Core story. Using call sign Raven, handler Walter begins getting contract jobs for 621. While doing these contract jobs, you hear from all the factions that are operating in Rubicon 3, the area of operations where all the factions are fighting for a single resource, which is known to be an ultimate power source, and by way of using the sortie, you launch into action. Now, depending on the certain jobs you take, you're making a decision on which factions to help and which ones you will ultimately destroy. Not everyone on the radio is part of the factions, however. There's one voice that is very different from the factions on Rubicon 3 and appears after 621 makes contact with the coral after an explosion. The voice is coming from the power itself. That's right. The so-called power of Rubicon 3 is essentially a life force called coral, which is made from the network of a living organism, and one of the minds you hear speaking to you connected to the network, which the organism creates, is air. Air is a AI-like life form construct that is used to communicate and persuade 621 and the player to take contracts that help preserve the coral while the corporation factions want to farm the coral. Air is the voice of reason of the Rubiconians towards 621 to push you to destroy the whole operation and help the Rubiconians to survive. This sets up multiple endings, and with New Game Plus, you get to see both endings using your fully kitted AC unit. In addition, there's also a special true ending. If you beat the game 3 times over again, I'll skip past full-on spoilers what happens, but a major key to the true ending is a coral release that creates a black hole which both warps you to another location and transforms everything, or everyone, into armored core units, or so it seems. Now, during a fight with a rival AC pilot, you come across intel that talks about a coral release and a possible symbiosis between machine and coral. This would suggest that the true ending of the coral release is the ability of the coral network to evolve into a mech droid of sorts, using AC units as their catalysts. So given this ending, and the way that the story transforms itself into a mystery of sorts with less information than the rest of the story that was ongoing, the real main question remains: what is the next step for the Rubiconians?
Main system. Activating combat mode.
Looking to the future of Armored Core, the question arises: what does the next Armored Core even look like? Well, let's start with the core aspects. First up, the gameplay. Armored Core 6 brought together all the years of lessons learned, whether it be how long a mission should go for, level designs in terms of areas to explore in verticality, to scale of certain scenarios like scaling a giant machine to destroy its laser eye, to flying between carriers and blowing them up, and of course giving us infinite flight for a full mission so we could blow up large targets and feel the full force of the Armored Core units. Next, to jump into visuals, hopefully future From Software titles will somehow have a visual leap in terms of some maybe ray trace capabilities, and maybe specifically for Armored Core, make the AC units feel more like a giant mech rather than just a small toy. I get the scale is massive compared to the map design, but on screen it doesn't really translate as well. The way the camera perspective is and the way the size of the Armored Core unit itself is shown on screen, it makes the AC units feel like a collector's item instead of a massive weapon of war. When I think of Armored Core units, I think of something to the scale of a Titanfall like mech, where you could do on a bigger scale some melee rock'em sock'em robot combat and also use the guns and missiles like we have now. That's also not to say I would want the gameplay to slow down. If FromSoft could figure out a way to scale up the AC units visually while also keeping the combat feel of, say, Armored Core 6, then that would go a long way to making the overall feel of gameplay that much more massive and epic, similar to the way the CGI reveal trailer was showing a more massive scale. Lastly, but maybe most important, the storyline. Armored Core 7 should continue what was started in AC6 with having major characters and winding storylines that creates a world at war. Could this be a universe dominated by coral mech droid factions? Or would it be the corporations setting up shop and hunting down the last of the coral networks using Raven as a sort of Grim Reaper AC unit? At this point, after seeing the true ending, I really don't know which way the canon story actually goes, or if the third ending is really the true ending. It seems like the next Armored Core could possibly need to either push the storyline ahead again by another 100 years to do a clean slate of sorts, or ask the player which ending they chose as their canon ending. If we do take the third ending as the true ending, something I'd like to see added is the option to create a faction of our own, maybe starting from the first core of the story where, like similar to say Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Raven could create a Mercs faction that fights back against the corporation's revenge force, since Raven helped stop the farming of the coral energy. This also assumes that the coral release didn't wipe out all living beings and turn them into AC units. The player could decide which characters they would want to have on their team, and those that don't get picked could turn into rivals working with the evil corp that is trying to once again harvest the coral energy into an energy source. This could create a more personalized dynamic on top of what's been previously done in Armored Core, other than just picking contracts and following orders. Each character you pick to recruit could also maybe set up a friendly mini boss fight of sorts that would prove to the potential ally that Raven is, well, worth their time and effort, since they would be probably giving up, hiding in safety, away from the corporations for a fighting new future with the Raven crew. All of this could lead to multiple storylines weaving in on themselves and a potential backstab in the long run, or the use of friendship to save the world, or save the day. But of course, that's where the player's choice would come into the fold. And many others too from the crew. Imagine a future Armored Core title that was made to be a AAA quality product with the same level of details and storytelling as that of the Titanfall 2 story, but instead of it just being a regular game, FromSoft could try their hand at, well, making another VR experience. Take Star Wars Squadron, Gran Turismo 7, or Resident Evil Village VR modes and make it Armored Core, where you're sitting inside the AC unit, having a gun and missile fight, while also seeing your cockpit start to shake and shatter with every hit you take. Not to mention the interactivity that the devs could play around with when it comes to being in the garage and selecting parts for the next mission. Armored Core 6 has brought new life to a once forgotten series, and has the potential to be a renewed staple of FromSoft games. Only time will tell, though, if Armored Core can evolve into even more of a mega hit, as it could become even bigger in scale and depth as we move forward onto bigger and better hardware, or did we just witness the last ride of a series dating back to the PS1 and that survived all these decades later? One thing's for certain, it was one hell of a return back into a series that not everyone loved, some forgot about, and some had never even heard of, but in the end, we all got a solid, explosive-filled, boss-hardened, in-your-face while spitting bullets and lasers in the face of great warrior machines. We all elevated to a new level and made Augmented Human C4-621 callsign Raven a legend of Rubicon 3 and the Rubiconians.
Let's see how far they can fly. On borrowed wings.